Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presta Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyachardejitarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Pramanityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Paditanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Hare Krishna. Yes, devotees, so here we are. We are in the 10th chapter, right in the middle of the Bhagavad Gita. Right in the center is just such an important part of Bhagavad Gita, and such a beautiful and wonderful part of Bhagavad Gita. And this section from verse 8 to verse 11, Chatushloki Bhagavad Gita, it's really very special because it is a summary of the message of the whole Bhagavad Gita. In a nutshell, it's very, very condensed and to the point. But still it's true. It's true. The essence of Bhagavad Gita is in these 4 verses. The first verse explains, just a sec. The first verse explains explains his opulences and how knowing him impels the devotees to serve him. That's verse 8. Then verse 9 explains how they serve him, in what ways they engage in his devotional service. And then verses 10 and 11, very, very special verses, they explain how Krishna reciprocates with the devotees. Yes, Krishna doesn't simply accept service as if he's a very important person. He just has the right to be served and like that. But he appreciates, Krishna appreciates when his devotees serve him. And he reciprocates. It's really very nice. So that's what we're going to discuss this evening. We'll see, maybe there'll be some extra time and we'll go on for a few verses further. We'll just have to see how it goes, but my initial prediction is that we will just be dealing with these 4 verses. So, as usual, first thing we'll do is just read through the translations of all the verses themselves, these 4 verses. And then, as usual, we'll go back and go through them in a little more detail. All right, so verse 8. I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. What a beautiful verse. and verse 9. The thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. That's how the devotees serve the Lord. And now verse 10, and then following at verse 11, how Krishna reciprocates with his devotees. So verse 10, to those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. And verse 11, same mood, reciprocation from the Lord. To show them special mercy, I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. That is just the mercy of the Lord. He is very kind to those who try to serve him. All right, so back to verse 8. I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. Don't forget, I can just mention from last night, don't forget that we were reading the first 7 verses last night. And the point there was, what was the point? That people don't understand Krishna. People don't understand Krishna because he is the origin of them, and it's very difficult to understand someone who is your origin, because their existence goes beyond your experience of them, and it all becomes, it's not even hazy, it's just beyond your comprehension. However, as Srila Prabhupada did point out, in the purport actually of verse 1, is that even though it's definitely like that, but still, if we hear nicely from the Lord and from his devotees, then we can understand. Whatever the Lord wants to explain to us, we can understand. So, okay. So therefore this verse, in this verse, Lord Krishna's pointing out, he is the source not just of everything material, which was more the point from verse 1 to verse 7, the demigods, the great sages who are living within this universe. For them it's difficult to understand Krishna. But here Lord Krishna is saying that he is the source not just of the material world and the demigods within it, but he is the source of all the spiritual worlds also. So that's really something else again. That's really something else again. Yeah, okay, so let's just go into this. I want to just make one tiny little adjustment here. It'll take a sec. All right, there we go. All right, so I'm the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada begins by saying that a learned scholar who has studied the Vedas perfectly and has information from authorities like Lord Caitanya, and Lord Caitanya, that's one thing, but this also includes the acharyas. It includes Prabhupada, any really bona fide authority in the line of Krishna consciousness. Yes, and who knows how to apply these teachings, can understand that Krishna is the origin of everything in both the material and spiritual worlds. And because he knows this perfectly, he becomes firmly fixed in the devotional service of the Supreme Lord. He can never be deviated by any amount of nonsensical commentaries or by fools. So that's Prabhupada's, you could say, his introduction to the purport of this very important verse. Then we'll see as we go through it now that basically what Srila Prabhupada does from this point onwards, Srila Prabhupada, in order to establish, you could say, the authenticity of this understanding of Krishna, how it's really correct and it's valid. What Srila Prabhupada does actually pretty much for the rest of the purport, and it's not a small, it's a medium, it's a little extensive purport. What Srila Prabhupada does is quote from different Vedic scriptures, which giving statements which establish this very point, that Krishna is the source. Krishna is just the all-round source of everything. And we must go through these. Right now, we'll just briefly look at each one. And there's a further point. It's a kind of, you could say it's a subtle point. But it's a nice point. It's a nice point, which if you're not really familiar with the structure of the Vedic literatures and how everything's put together and where it starts and then where it goes to and then where it goes to further and then where it concludes. If you're not familiar with these types of ideas, you wouldn't catch it. You wouldn't catch it. It's like that. So, what Srila Prabhupada does, it is a standard system for presenting evidence amongst Vedic scholars in the Vedic system. It begins with, first of all, if you want to establish a point, then first of all you give evidence from the Vedic literatures, which are called the Shruti, which basically means the four Vedas, Rig, Sama, Yajur, and Atharva, maybe particularly Rig, Sama, and Yajur, but anyway, the four Vedas and their corollaries, the supplementary literatures which are connected with them and which are basically elaborating on them and which are coming from the time that the four Vedas were presented. So he presents a number of quotations from different literatures from the Shruti, their corollaries of the four Vedas, and then he gives a couple of quotations from the Smriti. The Smriti means you could say the other Vedic literatures which are not part of the actual four Vedas or their immediate supplementary literatures like the Upanishads. So the Smriti means the Puranas, so that includes Srimad Bhagavatam. It means the Itihasas, which Itihasas means the historical literatures, giving in-depth descriptions, of great events that took place in great detail. So the Itihasas, or the histories, they are particularly Mahabharata and Ramayana. They're historical literatures. And of course, Bhagavad Gita is part of Mahabharata. So this is how, in Vedic traditions, if scholars want to present evidence to establish a point, this is generally how they do it. At least it's a very famous system for doing it. First of all, from the Shruti, the four Vedas, and the immediate related literatures, then the Smriti, which is the Puranas, the Itihasas, and there's also what they call the Smriti, different literatures on how to live, directions on how to live, the Dharma Shastras, like Ayurveda, Dhanurveda. These are all Smriti literatures. Ayurveda is talking about health. Okay, so this is what Prabhupada does, and it's just interesting to note that. So if we look at the purport, then we'll see that, first of all, Prabhupada quotes from Gopal Tapani Upanishad, which is very famous and very important Upanishad from the Atharva Veda. So he quotes from there that, I won't read the Sanskrit, but it was Krishna who in the beginning instructed Brahma in Vedic knowledge and who disseminated Vedic knowledge in the past. Right, so here we are. We are establishing Krishna. That's what we're doing. We're establishing Krishna as the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. Right, because this is what the verse is about. Krishna is saying he's the source of all spiritual and material worlds. So that is being confirmed in these quotes. And if, I'm sure you're all pretty familiar with Prabhupada's classes and his writings. You generally don't find purports which are just full of one quote after another from different Vedic scriptures. It's not common to find that. All right, so next is a quote from the Narayan Upanishad, which says, "Then the Supreme Personality Narayan desired to create living entities." Yes, so there you go. Narayan is a form of Krishna. Then the same Narayan Upanishad goes on further. From Narayan, Brahma is born, and from Narayan, the patriarchs are also born. The original people who produce the different species. From Narayan, Indra is born. From Narayan, the 8 Vasus are born. From Narayan, the 11 Rudras are born. From Narayan, the 12 Adityas are born. This Narayan is an expansion of Krishna. So again, Krishna is the source. And then another quote from Narayan Upanishad. The son of Devaki, Krishna, is the Supreme Personality. And then some more. Here's something now from the Maha Upanishad. In the beginning of the creation, there was only the Supreme Personality, Narayan. There was no Brahma, no Shiva, no water, no fire, no moon, no heaven and earth, no stars in the sky, no sun. And then again from the Maha Upanishad, it's also said that Lord Shiva was born from the forehead of the Supreme Lord. So those are the quotations that Prabhupada's presenting from Shruti, means the 4 Vedas and their corollaries. And now Prabhupada's going to go on and give, I think it's just a couple of quotes, just 2 quotes from the Smriti. From the Smriti. Just a sec. So Prabhupada, so in between those quotes from Shruti and now the upcoming quotes from Smriti, Srila Prabhupada comments, thus the Vedas say that it is the Supreme Lord, the creator of Brahma and Shiva, who is to be worshipped. And so now we go on. There's a quote from Lord Krishna from Moksha Dharma. Moksha Dharma is part of Mahabharat. So, yeah, it's part of Mahabharat. So, and Mahabharat, of course, as we just said, Mahabharat is itihasa. It's a historical literature. It's part of the Smriti. All right, so Moksha Dharma says, Krishna says in Moksha Dharma, the patriarchs, and again, those are the original progenitors, they're people who originally produce all the species. You know, if you read in the appropriate parts of the Bhagavatam, you'll find how, for example, I can't remember all the exact details, but some Prajapati, like maybe Kashyapa, just to give an idea. From him came all the birds, and from someone else came some other species. Those are the patriarchs. So Krishna says the patriarchs, Shiva and others, are created by me, though they do not know that they're created by me, because they're deluded by my illusory energy. And then, so that was Mahabharat, which is Itihasa. And now here's a quote from one of the Puranas, the Varaha Purana, or Mahavaraha Purana, it's also called. What now? Shri Shri Radharanath Shri Giri Govardhan Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. So Varaha Purana says, Narayan is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and from him Brahma was born, from whom Shiva was born. Right, so then right at the end of the purport, Prabhupada makes just a very, very essential point, but it's a point which, of course, we've heard so many times in the course of going through the Bhagavad Gita, and we'll hear it more too. One should understand this from a bona fide spiritual master with references from Vedic literatures, and then engage in devotional service with all one's energy. Yes. So this is what we should do. I mean, that's a paraphrasing, actually, to be frank. That's a paraphrasing. And here's something from a class by Srila Prabhupada in New York in 1967 on this very verse. Bhagavad Gita chapter 10 verse 8. So Prabhupada speaking, I am the origin of everything. Everything means the universe also. Whatever you can imagine, that comes within the category of everything. So if Krishna is the source of everything, then if you love Krishna, you love the universe. Actually, that is so. If you love your father, then you love your brother. If you love your country, then you love your countrymen. So the love begins from the origin. If you love your body, then you love your finger. Iti matva bhajante mam. One who has understood this fact, that God is the origin of all emanations, one who has understood this fact very nicely, scientifically, then by loving God, you love everything. And bhava samanvita, Buddha, one must be very well versed at the same time, completely absorbed in spiritual emotion, bhava. This bhava is the very highest platform for coming to the perfection of life. So, you know, one interesting little point that I came across in my research, you know, we do so much research into these things, gosh, is that Srila Prabhupada, he gave a few classes on this verse, and it's interesting to note that here what we just read. So at the end there, Buddha, one must be very well versed. In other words, one must be knowledgeable, and at the same time completely absorbed in spiritual emotion, bhava. So, in the same verse, actually, Prabhupada, same class, it's in January 1967, Prabhupada says, one has to become full in knowledge, and then full in bhava, love. Then it is complete. How that emotion is achieved? Through the process, adau shraddha. That faith has to be fanned, and it can come to the level of bhava. One has to associate with sadhus, those unflinchingly engaged in devotional service. So now, in another class on the same verse, in 1976, so it's almost 10 years later, Prabhupada says, first, one has to become intelligent. Then he can come to the level of bhava, love. First of all, shraddha. Then people come to see what is Krishna consciousness, and they associate with devotees. Okay, well that's interesting. I found that very interesting, I must say. All right, so we carry on now. But you get the idea that Krishna is saying he's the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from him. Everything, which includes Paramatma, it includes Brahman, it includes Vaikuntha, it includes all the avatars. It's just, it includes everything. And then if we know this, then we engage, it's a stimulus for engaging in service. And then, as we engage in service, knowing these things, then we come to the level of bhava, or transcendental affection and love for the Lord. And then verse 9, when a devotee comes to this level on the basis of knowledge of Krishna, becoming fully engaged in devotional service, and then in the course of being fully engaged in service, developing love for the Lord. So verse 9 explains what the devotee does. How does this love manifest in practical terms in the life of the devotee? What does the devotee do, being inspired by that bhava, by that love? So Krishna says in verse 9, the thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. You know, you may remember that just in the previous chapter, verse 9, there was the description of the Mahatmas, verses 13 and 14 of chapter 9. And it was Lord Krishna described there the activities of the Mahatmas, or the advanced devotees, basically. Satatam kirtayanto mam, yatantas chadridha vrata. First thing, always engaged in chanting the glories of Krishna. And so here, this is the same. They're always thinking of the Lord. Their lives are fully devoted to serving Him. And they're just absorbed in hearing and chanting about Him. Completely absorbed in the company of other devotees. Right, so in the purport, let's have a look here. So Prabhupada points out in the first paragraph that the devotees are just 24 hours daily engaged in glorifying the qualities and pastimes of the Lord. They engage themselves fully in service. And like this, their hearts and souls are constantly submerged in Krishna. And they take pleasure in discussing Him with other devotees. In the second paragraph, in the next paragraph, Prabhupada makes a couple of interesting points, a little more subtle than what he's said in the first paragraph, which is just basically sort of paraphrasing the translation, more or less. So Srila Prabhupada explains that in the beginning, when the devotee is just, Prabhupada says, in the preliminary stage of devotional service, in the beginning of devotional service, the devotees relish transcendental pleasure from the service. Yes, they're chanting, it's ecstatic. They're hearing about Krishna, it's ecstatic. They're cleaning the temple, they're speaking to people, they're taking prasadam, associating with other devotees. It's blissful. It's blissful. Now, of course, the point which isn't specifically mentioned here, but it's implied, and it's certainly the case, is that you could ask the question, well, how is it that they're relishing this transcendental pleasure from the service itself? What is it? Is it just nice activity? Well, it is nice activity, but it's not just nice activity like doing something you enjoy doing. No, it's not that simple. The thing is that Krishna is present. He's present in his names. He's present in his service. He's present in the books. He's present in prasadam. He's present in the association of devotees. So when we become absorbed like that, constantly submerged in Krishna, then means we are deeply contacting Krishna. We're deeply contacting Krishna. And Krishna is all blissful. And because Krishna is all blissful, when you're contacting him very nicely, you become all blissful. Of course. So that's why it is that in the preliminary stage of devotional service, the devotees relish the transcendental pleasure from the service itself, because Krishna's there in the service, and it's just wonderful being in contact with Krishna. And in the mature stage, they're actually situated in love of God. And once situated in that transcendental position, they can relish the highest perfection, which is exhibited by the Lord in his abode. So what does this mean now? It means that when they come to the advanced stage, then they meet Krishna. It's not just sort of indirect, or not that the experience is so indirect in the earlier stages, but it's not like being face to face with Krishna in a loving relationship, directly having exchanges face to face. So it means that on the very advanced levels, they see Krishna where they were just feeling, in the nice kirtan, they're feeling, wow, this is great. And so on, and other nice devotional activities, it's just great. But now they're seeing that it's great because Krishna's there. Right, and so then Srila Prabhupada goes on to explain the sort of the process, not exactly, what would you say, how it works. Prabhupada gives or refers to Caitanya Charitamrita, the example given by Lord Caitanya. Lord Caitanya compares advancing in Krishna consciousness, developing Krishna consciousness, to the development of a seed which is planted in the ground. So the seed of devotion is planted in the devotee's heart. And if, as Prabhupada says here, then if the devotee goes on hearing and chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, the seed fructifies, and then the plant of devotional service grows from the seed, and then it goes up, penetrates out of the universe into the spiritual world, wraps itself around Lord Krishna's feet, and then you go back to Godhead. Just see, that's nice. And then Srila Prabhupada, driving this all home, in the last paragraph, he emphasizes studying Srimad Bhagavatam. So that's nice. We should read Srimad Bhagavatam. He concludes the purport by saying, thus the realized souls in Krishna consciousness take continual pleasure in hearing such transcendental literatures, just as a young boy and girl take pleasure in association. Here's a couple of quotes from our previous acharyas. First of all, from Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. He's referring to this enthusiasm that these devotees have here. They're thinking of Krishna, their lives are fully devoted to serving him, and they're deriving great satisfaction and bliss from hearing and chanting together. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, their minds are greedy for my form, name, qualities, pastimes, and the taste of sweetness. They're unable to maintain their lives without me, just as men are completely dedicated to food, since they depend on it to live. The devotees, they explain to each other with friendliness about the types of bhakti and the real nature of bhakti. They talk about me, a great ocean of very sweet form, qualities, and pastimes, and glorify me by narrating about my form, qualities, and pastimes. And Baladev Vijabhushan says, they enjoy and relish the nectar of hearing and chanting about Krishna, just as a young boy enjoys the smiling glances of a young girl. Hare Krishna. Yes, well, I'm sure we all know about that. So that's what the devotees do when they're on the basis of their understanding of Krishna, and then being inspired to render service, and in that way developing love. So now verse 10, and this 10 and 11, as we said, this is how Krishna reciprocates. To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. So, yeah, Krishna gives an understanding. Oh, I know in the Russian version they say that they did the translation that Krishna says, I give the intelligence, in Russian, razum. But Krishna, Prabhupada, the way Prabhupada translates is understanding. Of course, understanding and intelligence, you can't really, what can you say? They're sort of intrinsically linked. But Prabhupada translates as understanding. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada makes the point that generally a devotee gets understanding by getting instructions from the spiritual master, from the devotees, from reading the books. But Prabhupada makes the point in the purport that it's in the last paragraph of the purport. A person may have a bona fide spiritual master and may be attached to a spiritual organization, but still if he's not intelligent enough to make progress, then Krishna from within gives him instructions so that he may ultimately come to him without difficulty. The qualification is that a person always engage himself in Krishna consciousness and with love and devotion render all kinds of services. He should perform some sort of work for Krishna, and that work should be with love. If a devotee is not intelligent enough to make progress on the path of self-realization but is sincere and devoted to the activities of devotional service, the Lord gives him a chance to make progress and ultimately attain to him. And I just thought I could read a little bit from the purport of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. You know, he expresses himself in very sort of colorful and heartfelt ways. So he says that here Arjuna asks, they have priti, which means love. So what is the need for buddhi yoga? And he says, Krishna answers, to enter into their direct relationship with me. And so Arjuna asks, how can they achieve that? Krishna says, I give them inspiration within their hearts. It doesn't come from within themselves or any other source. It comes only from me and can be accepted only by them. Then they come into my direct association. So this buddhi yoga, because that was Arjuna's question, so this buddhi yoga is the inspiration. It is me. It is my personal association. It's amazing, isn't it? And then we go on to verse 11. And Prabhupada, again, makes the same point. Even if a devotee does not, well, let's read verse 11. To show them special mercy, I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. So Prabhupada comments, but even if a devotee does not take advantage of their literatures, meaning the previous acharyas, or of his spiritual master, if he's sincere in his devotional service, he's helped by Krishna himself within his heart. So the sincere devotee engaged in Krishna consciousness cannot be without knowledge. The only qualification is that one carry out devotional service in full Krishna consciousness. Yes. So then, let's read a little more from Srila Prabhupada's purport. Only by devotional service is the Supreme Truth Krishna pleased, and by his inconceivable energy, he can reveal himself to the heart of the pure devotee. The pure devotee always has Krishna within his heart, and with the presence of Krishna, who's just like the sun, the darkness of ignorance is at once dissipated. This is the special mercy rendered to the pure devotee by Krishna, not just to the neophyte who we are reading about, who just, somehow or other, for whatever reason, isn't able to get instructions from the normal sources, the spiritual master, the devotees, the literatures, but the Lord helps the pure devotees also. not just the neophytes, by clearing things away. And let me just continue. The next paragraph, I'll start from about halfway through the last paragraph. The pure devotee does not have to worry about the material necessities of life. He need not be anxious, because when he removes the darkness from his heart, everything is provided automatically by the Supreme Lord, who is pleased by the loving devotional service of the devotee. This is the essence of the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. By studying Bhagavad Gita, one can become a soul completely surrendered to the Supreme Lord and engage himself in pure devotional service. As the Lord takes charge, one becomes completely free from all kinds of materialistic endeavors. And let's just read a little bit again, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Baladev Vidyabhushan. It's very nice. So according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Arjuna asks, without the functioning of knowledge and other such elements, how can they attain you? And how can they even strive for that goal? Without the functioning of knowledge and other such elements. Krishna answers, all this is not at all necessary. Having the intention of giving them mercy by all means, even without them having to worry about attaining my mercy, since I myself make the endeavor to give them mercy, then I, being situated within the functioning of their intellects by the lamp of knowledge, knowledge arising from bhakti, which is beyond the modes, not sattvic knowledge. Since bhakti alone can reveal me, I destroy the darkness born of ignorance in them alone, and not in other persons, such as the yogis. I alone do this, all on my own. Why should they strive for this purpose? I've already said that I carry the responsibility of their spiritual and material welfare. That was chapter 9, verse 22. Yogakshemam vahamyaham. I accept responsibility to supply all their material and spiritual requirements. And Baladev Vidyabhushan says, those fixed on me, my pure devotees, get my mercy, and I remove their darkness. I enter their hearts like a bee entering a lotus. Whatever traces of ignorance may still be there due to anadi karma, means beginningless karma, I personally remove. For such ananya bhaktas, I maintain them and give them the intelligence to act properly. They need go nowhere else. And then I manifest my transcendental qualities and form for them. So in other words, then they enter their eternal relationship with Krishna, who has personally removed any final traces of contamination that there may be in their hearts. In this way they come to the perfection of life. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur concludes his purport here. These famous 4 verses which have been narrated are the essence of all topics in the Gita, removing the misery, removing misery and producing complete joy for the jivas. And Baladev Vidyabhushan says, the intelligent people understand that what is proclaimed in the 9th and 10th chapters, which are the very womb of the Gita, is the essential meaning of the Gita. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.